My name is Jessie Lowry, and I'm an animal keeper and the conservation coordinator here at Blank Park Zoo. And if you guys haven't paid your $6 yet, the cash box is right over here at this table with Daniela, so please pay before you leave. And I'm going to start off. I've got a lot of technology going on up here, so please bear with me. It's not my strong suit. But we're going to start off with a greeting from the rainforest. Now that is real audio that I captured in Uganda of wild chimpanzees pant hooting, and that is a greeting in chimpanzee. Today you're going to hear a story about Blank Park Zoo's conservation efforts going to the next level, about the huge impact that a little zoo can have on conservation, and about my trip of a lifetime. First, I want to explain to you guys about the Pan-African Sanctuary Alliance, or Pasa. We've been supporting Pasa for several years. It's an alliance of animal sanctuaries that literally spans the continent of Africa. They take care of hundreds of orphan chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, other primate species, and all other kinds of species as well, not just primates. And the alliance wants to really raise the standards at the sanctuaries, help train staff in veterinary care, and also address the root problems of why sanctuaries are needed in the first place. Like I said, we've been supporting Pasa for several years. Now, how it all began. About 2005, Doug Kress, the CEO of Pasa at the time, came to the zoo and did a lunch and learn like I'm doing today. And after his presentation, I asked him how we could help his organization. And he looked at the shirt that I was wearing, one of these shirts, and said, the keepers in Africa would kill for these uniforms. And it kind of opened up my mind to a different way of supporting conservation projects, not just sending them a check, but maybe assessing the other needs that they have. Because a lot of times the supplies that we have here in Iowa are commonplace and easy to find, but the exact same things are going to be really expensive for them to get and really hard for them to find. So we gathered all of our old uniforms because we were just happening to get new uniforms anyway, and also added in some tools, some vet supplies, and shipped them over to Africa. A few months later, we had Evening for Gorillas, which is one of our evening events, and we saw this picture. And I think this picture is extremely powerful. It really tells a story about the tangible difference that we made, and you can just see the looks on their faces, how happy they are. In 2001, last March, myself and Kathy Krogmeyer, right back there, and Haley Anderson, two conservation volunteers, went to the Zoos and Aquariums Committed to Conservation Conference in Seattle. This was just an amazing conference, an international conference with representatives both from the field and zoo professionals like myself working on conservation problems. So I sat down with the people who are saving red pandas and saving the snow leopards and saving wild dogs and talked about how can zoos help them out. It was an extremely productive conference, and just by chance, we met Lily. This is Lily right here. She told us a story. She is the director of the Chimpanzee Sanctuary and Wildlife Conservation Trust, or CSWCT. They are a Pasa sanctuary. And they have a chimp sanctuary and also a program to protect the chimpanzees that are still in the wild. And the story was about her habitat monitors. It's a team of 27 young men and women who work in the field protecting chimps from capture for the illegal pet trade and poaching. And they're right on the front lines working with the communities to educate them about why chimps are really needed for the ecosystem. As oftentimes happens in Africa, doing this without any of the proper gear that needed to do the job. Didn't have boots to wear. Many of them were wearing flip-flops and were getting injured in the forest. Didn't have rain jackets, didn't have data collection supplies, just bare bones. So that was something that really hit hard with me and Kathy and Haley, and we brought back that story to Iowa. And immediately, the directors at the zoo staff, and the conservation committee all leaped into action. Here's a picture of our habitat monitors. And also, we changed their name from habitat monitors to Ugandan chimpanzee ambassadors. We thought that translated a little better here in Iowa and kind of explained more what habitat monitor meant. Here's our team. So how did we collect these items? Well, we looked for partnerships with local businesses. The staff and the conservation committee were extremely helpful and brought in items from home. We had a zoo-wide chimp challenge game where people competed with their fellow employees to win a free day off of work. We had an article in our zoo newsletter. WHO TV 13 did a story on the evening news. Zoo board, ambassadors, and volunteers all brought in items. And at the end, we collected coupons and shopped sales. We had an outpouring of support. We got what we wanted on our list and much, much more. Here's a picture of just some of the items. Flashlights, multi-purpose tools. The uniforms we got were the wick-away shirts, so kind of like soccer or golf shirts, because you can imagine how hot and steamy it is in Uganda in the forest. And cargo pants, school supplies, waterproof boots. So the actual donation for the ambassadors, we sent them funds for new bicycles, 27 new bicycles, backpacks, uniforms, rain gear, multi-purpose tools, watches, digital cameras, GPS units, first aid kits, waterproof notebooks, flashlights, headlamps. And we could have sent them money for this stuff, but they can't even get these things in Uganda. It's just not available. So that's why we had to purchase it here and send it over. So we also wanted to make a donation to the community, because that's a really big, important reason why we support Pasa, because they're addressing the holistic view of taking care of the surrounding communities as well as the wildlife in need, because they're totally connected. Notebooks, textbooks, art supplies, books, DVDs, DVD players, school supplies, toys, and much more. We had almost 500 pounds of stuff. Here are business supporters that gave us extreme discounts and even free items in some cases. You know, when you approach a business and you start talking, they can tell that you're going to ask for something. They kind of shut down, but as soon as we showed them the picture of our team and talked about the chimps, they immediately wanted to help. And our dedicated committee. You guys would not imagine how many long hours of work our committee put in to get all of these items together. We divided the committee up into teams of 2 or 3 people, and each person was responsible for an item. We had a sock team and a boot team and a rain gear team. Wonderful, dedicated committee. And Jane Goodall says thank you. That was one of the best nights ever. She came to talk at Civic Center last winter, and I wrote her a letter telling her what we were doing for chimpanzee conservation. And of course, Lily in Uganda also called her as well, because they're best buds. And she gave us 10 free tickets to her show and arranged for a private meet and greet after, and told us thank you for the work that we're doing. So that was just a wonderful reward for us and made all of the long hours worth it. We have a travel and training program at our zoo where employees can apply to go to conferences in different zoos for professional development. And I applied to go to Uganda to deliver the items personally, and I was approved. My mother and I had always dreamed of going on a trip like this. We always called it our sea turtle trip, thought that we'd be counting sea turtle eggs. And this is my mom right here, Patty Weeks. And she happily agreed to go with me. And in March of this year, we set off for Uganda. Now, before we get into the trip, I want to give you a little background on CSWCT. It was created to promote the understanding, appreciation, and conservation of chimpanzees and their habitats in particular, and wildlife in general. There's 2 arms of the organization, Namba Island, which is the chimp sanctuary, and also field conservation. Namba Island is a sanctuary for orphan chimps who have most times been confiscated from the illegal pet trade or directly from poachers. The field conservation is what we are supporting directly, and it really addresses the root causes of why chimpanzee habitat is declining and why the lucky ones are the ones that end up in the sanctuaries. So Mom and I set off for Namba Island. We left from Minneapolis, went to Amsterdam, stopped briefly in Rwanda to pick up more passengers, and landed in Entebbe, Uganda. And after a brief meeting with Lily at her office in the city of Entebbe, we set off for Namba Island. It was about a 45-minute boat ride across Lake Victoria. And on the boat, we crossed the equator into the southern hemisphere, which was neat, and saw spotted neck otters. And this Namba Island is 100 acres, where 98 acres is for the chimps and 2 acres is for the humans, which I think is pretty neat. It's separated by an electric fence. It's excellent habitat for not only chimps, but other animals like fruit bats and lizards and birds everywhere. And it's just a really, really beautiful, beautiful island. And they have about 45 chimps there. And they do come into enclosures at night. So they spend their day in the forest and come into enclosures at night willingly, so the caretakers can take care of their health. And they also come up to an electric fence about 2 or 3 times a day for supplemental feeding, but they find most of their food in the forest. And I want to tell you, the chimps that lived there were extremely healthy, just beautiful. Their coats were so shiny, and you'll see why from what they eat. So here is just some pictures of the activities we did while we were there. We participate in the daily activities of the chimp caretakers, helped with feedings and chimp food prep and cleaning enclosures. Luckily, I have a little experience in this area. Luckily, we had an emergency assembly point, which is kind of a funny story. It was a little sign right on the beach to Lake Victoria. And we asked, what is that? And they said, well, if you hear short whistles, find the nearest building, go inside a room and close the door. If you hear one really long whistle, run to the nearest building, go inside a door, lock the door, or run into Lake Victoria. So you guys can probably imagine what those whistles meant. The short whistles meant there was a baby chimp or a subadult out, and the long whistle meant there was an alpha male out. Escapes do happen about once a month. Didn't happen while we were there, but they said usually it's a frightened subadult being chased by an alpha that finally goes through the fence. And so it's a scared chimpanzee that immediately runs for the kitchen and starts getting food. Another neat story, Mom and I were staying in a room right by the night house for the chimpanzees, and there was a really violent storm one night. We thought the island was going to blow away. And of course, the chimps got extremely excited and were screaming and banging on the enclosures all night. And little to say, Mom and I didn't get any sleep, and we also were wondering, could we ever even hear that whistle if it was blown? Definitely not. Luckily, in the morning, everybody was where they were supposed to be. So this is feeding time. You can see the electric fence. This guy, it's hard to see, but he's using a stick as a tool to get this carrot, which is on the other side of the fence. They know all the weak spots in the fence. This guy's alpha, because look how much food he has. They would hold carrots in big clumps in their feet like this, and they catch them like baseballs. Up here, this is Sarah, one of Mom's favorite chimps. She was just recently confiscated from poachers and is still getting integrated into the group. It's really, really hard for them to put chimps together that are strangers, so it takes months and months, sometimes years. And you can see that these are mostly alpha adults, and the subadults are in the back, but they get enough food. And that's one reason why they come in every night. Here they are in the evening when they first come in, and this guy up in this corner is one of the alpha males. This is, he's eating porridge. It's the same thing that Ugandan human babies eat, really high in protein and high in nutrients, and they have those little bowls, and they just pour the porridge into the bowl, and they drink it through, and then they wait their turn and ask for more. It was pretty neat. So let's go through some chimpanzee facts. They use tools to fish for termites, to open nuts, and for drinking water. They eat fruit, but also insects and eggs, and occasionally monkeys. In the mainland of Uganda, they eat red-tailed monkeys mostly. Female chimps have first offspring when they're 11 to 12 years old, and the average time between babies is 3 to 5 years. That's one of the reasons why they're in decline, because of the slow reproductive rate. Chimps at Namba are not allowed to breed. They are implanted with contraceptives. And some more chimpanzee facts. They share 98.4% DNA with humans, and they're more closely related to humans than they are to gorillas. I think that's a really telling fact. They're in 21 African countries. There's 150,000 or so remaining in the wild, but they're in decline. Same things that we hear all the time: destruction of their habitat in the bushmeat trade, illegal pet trade. They live in groups of 20 to 100, each group being led by an alpha male, and they can live to be up to 50 or more. So the threats, like I said, the same things that we're always hearing. 100 years ago, there was 1 million chimps. Now there's 150,000. Habitat loss, commercial bushmeat trade, exotic pet trade, infectious diseases, and unfortunately in this part of the world, armed conflict. Now, Nagamba's chimps, most of them have been confiscated from the illegal pet trade and directly from poachers. Some of them can be rehabilitated, but they can't be released back into the wild. And that's for reasons that we've been talking about. Chimpanzees will not usually allow a stranger chimpanzee into their group, especially if it's a real family group living in the wild. It's a little different in the sanctuary setting. So these chimpanzees will live out their lives on the island. In the wild, they have very large home ranges. And also, if a baby chimp, they learn how to make their living in the forest from their relatives, from their parents. And if they miss out on that education, they may never recover. And they may not have the knowledge to find their food and stay clear of danger on their own. So now we're going to watch a short video so you guys can get a sense of what life is like on Namba Island. Really listen to the sights or the sounds of the birds and the chimpanzees. It was just a beautiful, beautiful place.
This is the best part. pictures of them in some other movies. If you can enjoy the sounds, this is what it sounds like here. Power. Everything's solar power. The heating the water. Chimpanzee forest walk, and he is our new best friend. This is something that they eat, and it's a porridge. Very simple.
So there we were pant-hooting with the chimpanzees, and we were laughing because they were answering us. So after 3 or so days, we had to leave Namba. We were sad to say goodbye, but now we're off to Western Uganda so we can meet our ambassadors and talk about field conservation, which is the next arm of the organization which we support. So they want to address the root issues that are threatening populations of wild chimpanzees. In 2007, they expanded their work to work in the communities living alongside the wild chimpanzees to make sure that those people are benefiting from their close proximity to these wild animals. They want to enhance conservation education, forest conservation and restoration activities. They want to facilitate community development, conduct research activities, and initiate and strengthen partnerships for conservation. And they're everywhere. They're helping farmers grow food in sustainable ways. They're in the schools teaching children about wildlife and the environment. They're training community leaders in sustainability. They're working with the government on laws protecting the environment. They're not only protecting the chimps, but every single other animal in the forest. And what Mom and I especially admired about them is also the human populations that are surrounding. Here's a map of where we were. Lake Victoria is southeast, so we traveled about 6 or 8 hours to get over to the western side of Uganda. And here is where our ambassadors work. There's about 5 different districts, and it's all in a place called Hoima. And these districts are communities that live around wild chimpanzees. They're not protected areas. They're privately owned rainforest areas. Smaller teams of ambassadors will work in each one of these districts, and the ambassadors are from those districts. They live in those villages, so they know, they have an intimate knowledge of the dynamics at play. So we packed up our boxes and headed west. Like I said, it took about 6 to 8 hours on very bumpy roads to get there, and Lily was apologizing for how uncomfortable and long the ride was. But of course, Mom and I were just glued to the windows because this is the first time that we really got a glimpse of the mainland Uganda's amazing landscape. It just changes drastically from short distances. It'll go from lush rainforest to woodland to scrubland to desert in a really short distance. And of course, this is also our first time where we saw village after village of local Ugandans. And people generally have enough food to eat in Uganda because the soil is so fertile, but they're very, very poor. And you know, I don't have a lot of pictures of this part because we wanted to make sure we didn't take any pictures of anybody that wasn't okay with it. But all day long, what they're doing is just getting enough water, getting enough food, and getting fuel for their family. So alongside the roads, you see mostly children and women walking long distances with huge big yellow jugs on their shoulders, and that was full of water. There's one water well every other village or so, several miles apart, and even though the water is accessible, it's not clean usually. Only about 14% of Ugandans have access to clean water. And on the other arm, they had a huge big bundle of wood from the forest. So when we got to Western Uganda, we had no idea what was waiting for us. Every single ambassador from all over Western Uganda was there to meet us. This is me and Lily. She is the CEO of CSWCT, and she's dedicated her entire life to chimp conservation. She is Jane Goodall. She is Uganda's Jane Goodall. And she's like a celebrity. Everybody knows Lily. So again, here is our team of ambassadors. This is the before picture. And here they are after. There's our boys in blue. And there's a quote from Lily, "They look so smart." That's how you say you look good in Uganda. You look so smart. Look at those smiles. There was just an overwhelming sense of joy in the air. We had a reception, and all the ambassadors stood up and told us what they did for the organization, how long they've been working there, and they welcomed us to Uganda, and how grateful they were. We went outside and opened the boxes, and they just tried on the clothes right there in front of us, and they got in a line and shook our hands, and it was just the most amazing day ever. We wanted to give them the stuff that they needed to do their job, the things to protect their feet and to protect, them from the elements. But more importantly, maybe we wanted to give them a sense of pride and professionalism, and also wanted their fellow villagers to look up to them and also want to be cool like them and protect chimpanzees. And we definitely did that. This is the Ugandan handshake. Took Mom and I a couple days to get used to it, but we got it down. Here's a few previous pictures. We did send a couple boxes of like the GPS units and cameras there before, so that's them opening the boxes. We sent them funds for bikes. There's the before and after for the bikes. Okay, now we're going to watch two videos. First, just a sense of what it was like to meet the ambassadors when they were opening up the boxes. And second, a video of Patrick, who is one of the ambassadors, and he just really says it best.
Blood, because it was just by chance really when I was like, send me some information.
Always are going to have friends in Iowa and the U.S. and we did that pant-hoot everywhere we went. Didn't matter if we were at a restaurant, in the city, it doesn't matter. We did that everywhere.
Welcome our visitors. Welcome to this most beautiful region, Alberta region. Again, thank you for the donations you've given to us. I think even if others have not talked, but they are deeply happy. So, yeah. And I myself am also happy. I promise on behalf of the other monitors, we are ready to serve beyond expectations. On that note,
so that just gives you kind of a feel for how grateful they were and how it felt to be there. Okay, so let's talk about what CSWCT does, what these ambassadors are doing. They're involved with reforestation projects. They've established tree nurseries, and they have a capacity to produce over 100,000 seedlings per year. And of course, they encourage proper forest management, and they train forest owners to employ recommended forest procedures. And they're really paving the way for a more sustainable future for both humans and wildlife. Here's the picture of the GPS units that we sent them. This is a great example of the huge difference that it's making. Before they had GPS units, they literally had to measure out the rainforest plots by hand by walking with tape and flags. And an example that they gave me is the government would say, listen, CSWCT, stop whining. You guys have 17 acres of prime chimp habitat over there. You guys have enough. And then they can show the actual real technology, the real science. Actually, no, I have this GPS system, and it says that we only have 12, and 4 of them were just burned yesterday. We planted trees. When you plant trees in Uganda, and by the way, they grow so fast, so sometimes when people talk about reforestation projects in Africa, I kind of feel like maybe how could that really work in time to save the species? The trees that were planted a couple years ago are 20 feet tall. It is amazing. They grow so much faster than the trees here, so reforestation projects are really, really productive. So you name trees that you plant in Uganda, and then that's Julius, and he's a shining example of the power of CSWCT. He was in major conflict with chimpanzees, and the CSWCT came in because they were eating his crops. They showed him how to plant other crops and also how to protect the crops from chimps and baboons. Baboons are known as vermin there. They really are aggressive towards humans and tear up gardens and break into houses. But you can put acacia bushes around your gardens or your fields, and also hot peppers. So they taught him how to do that, and they also employed him as a tree nursery producer, and he's now an elder in the community and a main driving force for CSWCT. This is a really sad picture. You can see the beautiful rainforest in the front and then the burned area right here. It was just burned a couple days before we were there. You can see it's still smoldering. And just about a mile down the road was our first sighting of wild chimpanzees. So this was prime habitat for chimps. Chimps were here right before it was burned. And you know, CSWCT does offer a payment for ecological services where they'll pay the rainforest owners about $30 per acre per year to keep it as rainforest, because these are not protected areas. They're owned by lots of different families. Each family has a little plot of their own, but sometimes that's just not enough because they're just right on that edge of not being able to feed their families. So this guy burned it so he could grow crops. These are some snares and traps removed by CSWCT. We went on a chimp trekking tour at the very end of our trip, and we asked if there was any problems with poaching in this area. And he said no, not since ecotourism had started. The guards went in and pulled all the traps. The government went in and bought the ex-poachers chickens and goats to help feed their families, and the problem was solved. I know it's not always that easy, and it doesn't always work out that well, but in this instance, even though there's positive and negatives that we all know about for ecotourism, it worked. This is Seisei. He is a real environmentalist. He's been living in his little patch of rainforest since the 1960s, and since he has protected it and held out and not burned it down for crops, he has personally saved over 40 chimps. He took us through this forest. He knows every tree and every plant. He got one of our bikes, which I was delighted to hear, and I want to make sure that we get one whole new uniform set to, even though he's not an ambassador, he's the real thing. Okay, so they also do research and monitoring besides reforestation projects to understand chimp distribution and chimp movements in private forests and relate it with proposed plans for effective interventions. And so they're monitoring the habitat of chimps and other mammals, and they know how many chimps live in their areas. They know if one has been poached or captured for the illegal pet trade, but not much of this is happening anymore because of their outstanding work. Here we are counting chimp nests, and the guys sporting their new rain gear, and it was not raining that day. They just wanted to wear them. Here's some more pictures of the research and monitoring. So they're really just working in the forest to try to find out what's happening with each of these chimpanzee groups and which farmer is getting ready to burn and what's happening. Okay, so sustainable livelihoods, like we've been talking about. We want to make sure that these people have another way to feed their families besides poaching from the forest. It's an alternative source of income for forest owners. They teach them how to do beekeeping, handcraft making, poultry, piggery, vegetable growing, and tree nursery. It says 2,600 local people have been directly affected and 22,000 indirect beneficiaries, but I guarantee it's like triple that. It's much more indirect beneficiaries. And so they have women's groups all around the country of Uganda, in Hoima especially, making beads and necklaces. And Mom's going to hold up a couple necklaces, and if you don't mind passing those around, because you're not going to believe that they're made out of paper. They're made out of recycled paper. We went into a woman's house, and she showed us how to do that. And there they are. This is a women's group. That's the CEO in the front, and in the back in the pink shirt is the treasurer. CSWCT went in and took these women, because they live on an island fishing village, took them to the mainland of Uganda and traveled them all around so they could teach other women how to make these beads and support their families without poaching from the forest. And there's a picture of the beads. Okay, so now we're going to see a video of one of Mom and I's favorite day there. We went to a woman's house, and she made us this beautiful lunch. We sat and ate and talked about conservation. That's all they want to talk about is conservation and what they're doing for the environment and what we're doing in Iowa for our environment. They knew all about Iowa and Des Moines and even Winterset. And so then an elder came, and he talked to us for about an hour, and he got to know us, and he gave us our Ugandan names. Everybody in Uganda has one of 12 names, and Mom's name is Akiki, which means bridger of gaps, and my name is Atuki, which means advisor. And after we got our names, we had to dance for our names. Luckily, you're not going to see that. But you will see the women dancing for us, and it was just beautiful. They were wonderful people. And thank you very much, Nick, for getting that video ready for me. This is a family that CSWCT has trained to keep bees and do piggery. They showed us their operation behind their house. And of course, they also put on soccer games. They do everything. The day that we drove up to the soccer game, we were about 2 hours late because nothing is on time in Uganda. You can't plan anything. Things go wrong all the time. And we pulled up and I wondered why the soccer game hadn't started and why there were hundreds of onlookers staring at us as we pulled up. Well, it was because they were waiting for me to make a speech. So I almost died of fright, but they were very, very nice. And after that, we also were bringing the balls and the whistles and the flags. So they were great soccer players, and this was a championship game, and the winner of this game got a jersey that has a chimp conservation message and a picture of a chimp on it. Here's an education center where families come and learn how to farm organically and also use fuel-efficient stoves. See the stove down in the corner? It has one stick coming out of it. That one stick can provide heat and cook all the food for the family for the whole day. And before that, they would get a pile of wood out of the forest. There's one of our bikes that we bought them. And the movie nights. I didn't take this picture, I got it off the web, but they have these big community nights where they come in and children do act out plays and they teach people about conservation. And this is one of the things that Lily told us about at ZAC was that they had one Jane Goodall DVD that they were watching for years and they weren't complaining at all. They loved that DVD, but they only had one. And in our donation, we sent about 30 to 40 DVDs, including Planet Earth and Life of Mammals and DVDs on whales and things that I'm sure a lot of these people have never seen before. So I cannot wait to hear about their movie nights now. Here's just a graphic about our partnership. Okay, so towards the end of the trip, Mom and I went chimp trekking for wild chimps, and we were extremely lucky, and we saw 50 wild chimps. It was just an amazing, amazing experience. They were all around us. And we also saw black and white colobus, we saw red-tailed monkeys, we saw mangabees. Where's Chad? And some birds, I guess. It was just a wonderful experience. And please excuse the amateur video, but I want you guys to see this video because this is what CSWCT is working so hard for, and now what we're saving as well.
It's because they are a family. And I didn't just see one community.
I didn't see that.
It's very. The distance, this is when coming person. Yeah. Tree. There is one is baby on the back. It's going to cross the tree.
Okay. That's our guide talking. I got it. This guy's name is Babyface. They know all the chimps. They named them. They're habituated, but they're wild. So that was an amazing day, to say the least. So what can you do now to help? You can join the Conservation Committee. And Chris, we can take your names, Chris, right here, if you want to join the Conservation Committee or give us some support. You can also work to protect your local environment here in Iowa and go to nagambaisland.com to support them directly. Now we're going to end with Lily telling us thank you, and then after that, a montage of all of the wildlife photos, all the good ones that I took.
Doing what they are doing. So thank you so much. And for Jesse, Patty, Blanc Park Zoo, your family, we can't say thank you enough. We feel completely indebted. We can't pay you back, but we can only promise that we'll do our best to make sure that whatever we do will make a difference for the world, not just for ourselves. Thank you.
much. Does anybody have any questions? She actually is from Uganda, and she has a business degree, which is kind of interesting. Yep. I don't think so. That is just really kind of out in the boonies, and there's really not much around. It's really far away from Entebbe and Kampala. Where we went and saw the wild chimps with the video, that was up by Murchison Falls, up north towards Sudan, and that was in a big national park. So I don't think the areas that we went to get much tourism at all. When the video that you saw, yeah, they were totally habituated. They did not even look at us besides that one subadult who turned around and looked, but they really didn't act like they cared that we were there at all. They're all habituated, which means they're all really used to human presence, and they've got just a handful of guards that know all of their names, that keep track of them just like our ambassadors keep track of the other chimps.
Those are the people that are taking you in.
Mm-hmm, yep. And I mean, something could have happened. They're still wild animals, but they didn't seem to even notice that we were there, which is good.
Okay.
Yep. Well, we also have an event coming up on Friday, Dr. Herbert Covert. So we've got still a few seats available for that. And please see Chris if you'd like to sign up to be on the Conservation Committee. And thank you all very much.